Listen, what you've been paying for patio furniture is outrageous, but you ditched the specialty stores and started saving more at HomeSense. Now you're under a designer umbrella on a luxurious teak lounge chair. HomeSense, the home of no compromise, part of the home goods family.
Adventures don't always go as planned. One minute you're cruising in your RV, the next your tire hits a massive pothole. Progressive is ready for you when the unexpected hits, with excellent claim service for your boat, RV, and motorcycle. Plus optional coverage like roadside assistance and on-the-water towing. Visit Progressive.com and make sure your next adventure is unforgettable, for the right reasons. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Coverage is subject to policy terms and limits.
For a long time, even throughout the 1960s, interracial marriage in the U.S. wasn't just controversial. In many states, it was illegal. That changed in 1967 when the Supreme Court unanimously struck down those bans in Loving versus Virginia, a case brought by a black and white couple from Virginia who were arrested by the state for being married. But years before that decision, one Chicago professor was already testing a different idea. Robert Roberts, a white social anthropologist at Roosevelt University in Chicago, believed interracial marriage could challenge structural racism from the inside. He married a black woman in 1954, and they had 3 daughters together. The eldest, Dorothy Roberts, is a professor of Africana Studies, Law, and Sociology at the University of Pennsylvania. She's also the author of The Mixed Marriage Project, a memoir of love, race, and family.
He was interested in dating Black women and interested in Black people and was very concerned about what he called the racial caste system in Chicago. He wanted to topple that system, and he thought interracial marriage was a good way to do that.
Throughout her childhood, Robert's father interviewed hundreds of interracial married couples, focusing entirely on Black and white couples. Sadly, he passed away before he was able to publish the book, and in his absence, Dorothy Roberts was determined to complete his research. However, she quickly realized there was more to the story than she expected.
I just assumed that he was interested in this topic because he fell in love with my mother, and that a book on interracial marriage grew out of the love and devotion they had to each other. It just never occurred to me, and he never spoke about prior interviews. So it never occurred to me that he had become interested in this topic long before he met my mother.
Roberts had mixed feelings about this connection and questioned whether her entire childhood and family unit were just part of his research. She remembers discovering a file numbered 224 among the interviews he conducted with children. This was her file.
It just was an obvious question that occurred to me because he was so interested in interracial marriages before he started one for himself. But, I was very close to my father. He discussed his research with me a lot, and he was very involved in my upbringing. And I knew he loved me dearly, and I loved him. So I really don't think in the end that he had a family just to support his research, but our family and his research were definitely deeply, deeply entangled with each other.
Roberts never knew her white grandparents since they died before she was born. She later learned her father delayed marriage until after his mother's death, believing she would have opposed his relationship with a Black woman. Roberts also didn't know any of her white uncles.
The prejudiced members of the family were definitely his brother, his younger brother, Edward, who disowned my father when he married my mother. And I never met him, even though he and his family lived in Chicago. I never met him. I never met my cousins until I looked one up as an adult after I'd become a professor. I looked him up. This cousin of mine, first cousin, was a professor at University of Oregon, and I looked him up and we connected for the first time. I was already grown and had a career. So that brother, Edward, definitely had a problem with my father marrying a Black woman.
She wonders how her father became so open-minded. One possibility was his time living with an aunt who was a missionary in India. After high school, he spent months in a small village. an experience that she believes shaped how he saw culture and the differences between us. As for herself, she grew up in Hyde Park on Chicago's South Side, a racially integrated professional neighborhood. But even within that environment, lines still existed. She didn't cross into nearby areas that were predominantly Black and lower income. This was a divide she only fully recognized later.
And growing up, I really regret to say that even though there were kids from this area, we just called it 47th Street, the whole area beyond 47th Street. Kids from 47th Street I went to school with, I really didn't become close friends in the way I had sleepovers and birthday parties with the children who lived south of there. And we were told not to go beyond 47th Street.
Roberts says that when she was a little girl, she wasn't aware of the advantages and privileges she enjoyed as a Black child with a white father.
When I was very, very young, I was very proud to be part of an interracial family. I can remember walking down the street with my father on one side, my mother on the other side, holding hands and skipping between them and being so happy that the world could see that it was possible to have a loving, happy interracial family.
But by the time she was off to college, her feelings had changed. Roberts fully identified as a Black person and at times felt the need to distance herself from her family background.
I hid the fact that I had a white father because I didn't want anything to interfere with my close relationship with my Black colleagues and fellow students at college. And if anything, I thought more about my Black identity and my affiliation with Black people than thinking about privileges I might have had from having a white father. I later began to think more about that. My whole career has been writing about racism and white supremacy, white privilege, and what it will take to have a truly multiracial society where everyone is treated equally.
Today, Roberts recognizes the complexity of this experience. She understands that her father's race shaped where she lived and the opportunities she had, even as it raised difficult questions about privilege and belonging. And in her father's research, many interracial couples described experiencing direct and often extreme discrimination,
including having to live in the Black Belt where Black people were forced to live because of residential racially restrictive covenants as well as mob violence and other forms of discrimination. So that has changed dramatically. But it's still the case that interracial marriages are rarer than you would expect if people didn't pay attention to race. So just at random, if people got married, just matched randomly, there would be far more interracial marriages.
That said, race is still a major factor when people consider potential partners. Roberts did a study of dating apps and found that, by far, white men were the least likely of any group to marry interracially. Experts say that 20% of all marriages in the U.S. are interracial. This includes all races and not just Black and white.
But it really depends on where you live. There's more in some places than in others. You may see more, for example, on a college campus than in, a rural area somewhere in the United States. So it depends on where you look. But I agree with you that even though the numbers and popularity or acceptance of interracial marriage has increased since 1967 and increased dramatically, that it's still not common. I think that interracial marriages still do garner, as with you, a surprise. People still talk about being stared at an interracial marriage.
She describes a Black man and his white wife whose son has light skin and blonde hair and doesn't look like his father.
He was joking about how, kind of joking, but also concerned that people give him the strangest looks, and he's afraid that some people think he's kidnapped his own son. I've known Black women who have children with their husbands who are white, and people believe the mother is the nanny of the child. So there's still, I think, a sense that there's something strange or unusual about interracial marriages, interracial relationships, interracial families that continues today.
Even though Roberts has published her father's research, she disagrees with his theory that promoting interracial marriages is a path toward racial equality. Instead, she argues that relationships don't erase structural inequality, and that real change requires a broader reckoning with how those systems operate.
I think that it's when we achieve true racial equality, when we are able to think of all human beings as equal and understand our common humanity, we'll see more interracial relationships. But at this point, as was true in the 1930s when my father started this project, the barriers, the divides, the stereotypes that are based on race, I think are so strong that we're not going to see the number of interracial relationships we would if those barriers didn't exist.
Roberts believes meaningful change begins with acknowledging our shared humanity and rethinking how we relate to each other. Her book, The Mixed Marriage Project, a memoir of love, race, and family, is available now online and can be requested through your local bookstore. To find out more about our guests this week, visit viewpointsradio.org. This show is written and produced by Polly Hansen. Our executive producer is Amira Zaveri. Our studio manager is Jay Silvers. I'm Marty Peterson.
Refresh your next pasta night by shaking up your red sauce routine with Bertolli Alfredo, America's #1 selling Alfredo sauce. Bertolli Alfredo is made with fresh cream, real butter, and aged Parmesan cheese. And just like all Bertolli sauces, it's inspired by Tuscany and rooted in over 160 years of Italian tradition. Rethink pasta night. Take the Alfredo. Bertolli. Buy now at a grocer near you. Source Circana Total U.S. Multi-Outlet White Sauce Dollars Units Pound Sales Calendar Year 2025.
You do it all. So why not get all the electrolytes? Hydrate better than water with new Gatorade Lower Sugar. Now with no artificial flavors, sweeteners, or colors. And 75% less sugar than regular Gatorade. New to the fridge. All the Gatorade electrolytes you love. Gatorade Lower Sugar. Is it in you? Now available nationwide.